Hey, welcome back to another episode. Flub that. Welcome back to another episode of the MMA Prospectus. I'm joined this time just by Patrick Wyman. I think Grant might be dead. I don't know. He's not answering his phone. He's not on email. He,
He failed in his quest to win the Metamoris Kumite. Uh, Either that or he was murdered at a truck stop somewhere in Nebraska, attempting to make his way from Chicago to Los Angeles to participate in said Metamoris Kumite.
it's true, yeah. So we haven't heard from Tom for days and days, and at this point, I have to assume that he's just dead in a back alley somewhere. His belt wrapped firmly around his neck. He anyway, we're yeah, okay. So
God,
we're here to talk in his memory about prospects. This is a Tom Grant memorial show, um, or something like that. And
this is perfect. This is
yeah,
great opening. Best we've ever done. Absolutely.
any kind words for Tom, Pat?
Um, we barely knew you.
Great.
No, I'm sure Tom is fine. He's just off doing Tom things in Chicago, which I assume is still a frozen hellscape.
No, that's
Uh,
right. He's in Chicago, so he's probably choked to death on a hot dog.
Italian beef. Tried to drink an entire can of Old Style at once. I don't know how many stereotypes can we fit in here about the great America's second city.
Yeah. All right. So Tom's not here. We're here to talk about MMA. We got a lot of stuff to cover this show, as always. We're gonna go over the last UFC Fight Night card. There were a lot of prospects there. A lot of people performed. A lot of people failed miserably. It's always interesting to look at. And we will also take a look at the two upcoming TUF seasons, TUF Brazil 4 and TUF 21, as TUF Brazil 4 may be the best potential TUF Brazil season we've seen. Maybe, maybe not. It's a good one. And TUF 21 is definitely the best Ultimate Fighter I've seen since they had Dillashaw and Dodson on. Like that season was a great. This is probably as good as it's been since then, and that was quite a while ago.
Yeah, I mean they're both absolutely stacked with talent, and I'm especially intrigued by the ATT versus Blackzilian season, just because those are all dudes who will be training out of what is essentially their home gym for this, and that's I don't know. I think it's a much more interesting dynamic than what we've been given in the past, where these rivalries or conflicts are invented kind of out of whole cloth. And that's not to say that the ATT and the Blackzilians are literally at each other's throats over the large South Florida area or anything like that. But there is kind of a natural geographic rivalry there, and there are guys who used to train at one place who are now at the other, and there's stuff that you can do there that you can't do on kind of a manufactured tough season.
Well, and two, you just have the basics of people who are going to watch this season. You have two gyms in the same area. You got fighters who are looking like where do I want to train? They're going to see how your gym coaches in a highly sensationalized way, but still like the baselines of how they coach, who's there, what your talent's like on this TV show for everyone.
Yeah,
It's important.
yeah, I am really curious as to how deep they go into showing the training, because both of those places are known for really hard sparring sessions and really hard and just I mean they are tough places. They're tough places for prospects to come up, which is part of why the prospects that do make it through there end up being really good. If you can hang with those dudes on a daily basis, then you're going to be good enough to compete with anybody in the world. But I mean, an environment like this is by and large what produces the guys who are going to be the next champions. They're not generally speaking people who come up at tiny little camps in the middle of nowhere. They're people who are molded and shaped by these big high-level institutions.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just the fighters that they have for the season are so much better than what they've been getting lately. I hope it's a shift that they can maintain. I hope that maybe by doing this, they generate enough interest from other gyms to get other gyms to sign on and say we'd like to be next. I mean, I would love to see like Fight Spirit team versus All Stars.
Yeah,
That would be awesome.
yeah. Anything to get Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov some screen time
Yeah,
because that guy seems like a goddamn treasure. Plug for our friend Kareem's article on the fighting Nurmagomedov family, which you can find on Bloody Elbow. Fantastic, highly recommend it. But Habib's father, Abdulmanap, is one of the best judo and sambo coaches in the entire North Caucasus. Just a super sharp dude, and watch some of his training videos, and there's some really interesting stuff in there. I highly recommend.
yeah. He's one of the few coaches in that region putting out training videos that really show the process of how to transfer sambo to MMA.
Yeah, he is. I cannot recommend him highly enough. But I know the UFC. Well, I don't know if it's actually the UFC. I know they're trying to do documentaries. That somebody is trying to do a documentary on Khabib and his father, but I don't know how far that's gotten or anything like that. I mean, I know somebody's
Yeah.
trying to do it. If the UFC were smart, they would have camera crews in Dagestan 24/7. But just saying,
Well, they might be losing camera crews in Dagestan 24/7 too.
that is an excellent point.
Did you see that Instagram video that Zubert Tuhukov posted?
Dude, okay, so to our listeners, if you have not seen this, it's basically a picture of a whole bunch of Chechen MMA fighters and Roger Huerta
Yeah.
just brandishing more or less giant firearms. And is there a rocket launcher in there? It looks like there's a rocket launcher in there, right?
There might have been. There's very least there's a minigun. There's like like a huge mounted machine gun.
Yeah, I mean, these dudes look like they're ready to take on fucking Skynet. You
Yeah.
know, but uh,
Anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's not why we're here. They can do whatever they want. That's
can they?
Well,
Mm,
who's gonna go to Dagestan and tell them they can't, or Chechnya in that case, and tell them,
literally nobody, especially when they're armed like that.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the recent fight night before we get into the tough stuff. Just to get this out of the way. Top performance. Who is the prospect that you saw the most out of on this show?
I've got two answers. I would say, first of all, Christos Yagos, I thought looked awesome. I think that was a really good win for Gilbert Burns when it happened, and
Mhm.
and I think people were just like, oh, this dude who came in, he was like 10-2 at the time, and Burns just kind of ran through him very quickly, and I think people did not really pay attention to how good Yagos actually is. He is a absolutely outstanding athlete. He's a very good wrestler. He's got a lot to build on, and when Diego Lima, who is a really big welterweight and a good athlete and pretty good at everything, really struggled to get Jorge Oliveira, to get him down and hold him down. Yagos blasted him off his feet inside 20 seconds, took him down, and just beat the crap out of him before locking in a choke. Like, that was a really impressive performance.
Yeah, that was a great performance. It does show that Jagos, at the very least, he has the physical talent to be a top fighter.
Yeah.
Whether all the skill comes along behind it, because Oliver, I mean, yeah, it's a good win. It's exactly the win that he should have gotten, and that Diego Lima could not for the life of him get.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it,
exactly.
it's exactly the win he should have gotten. It shows that he has that potential, and so it really is just about can he keep building the striking? Can he keep building the wrestling? Can he keep building the grappling to meet his athletic potential? And so it was a great performance along the way. Uh, I think one fighter I guess I should say I'm interested in, not because I think he's gonna be like top tier, but just because it was good to see it put out what I had hoped to see, which was Freddy Serrano.
Mm.
It wasn't a great fight up till the knockout, but that knockout and just his general collection of skills, like sort of like Yagos, it's like the athletic talent is there. will everything else meet up with it?
You know what Serrano kind of reminds me of? Let me bounce this off you. Like a homeless man's Yoel Romero. So because Serrano was a bronze medalist in freestyle at the
Yeah,
Pan
Pan
American
Ams.
Games.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, he's not like a world class wrestler, but he's a very good wrestler. And he's rather old, but he's also got this striking base, and he's an awesome athlete. And you're like, God, like in Serrano's case, unlike Romero's, you're like, God, I wish he was like 7 or 8 years earlier, even 5 years
yeah.
earlier, because I think he's 35 or 36. Like,
I have to say though, when you said homeless man's Yoel Romero, my immediate thought was Maximo Blanco. So
actually, I mean, Maximo Blanco might be a better analog for Serrano than Romero. I
yeah,
mean, so just minus the shit awful fight IQ and just puzzling in fight decisions that Maximo Blanco has made a habit of making over the years.
yeah. Serrano, I mean, I think he at least has the ability to inject some real fun into that flyweight division while he's there. Be a tough out for guys. Maybe creep up into the top 15 if God forbid one day, Chris Carriazo falls out somehow.
Chris Carriazo, man, he is just the perpetual whipping boy for everything.
He
Just
is.
got a feel for the dude.
I
Uh,
do. I really
but
do.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think Serrano's the kind of dude where, yeah, he's older, but he's still an awesome athlete. He is still a
Yeah.
plus athlete relative to that division. He's one of the few guys who has a really deep wrestling background in that division. Like, there are a lot of
Yep.
dudes, by the way, who know how to wrestle some, but there are very few guys who have, like, a real defined wrestling base. Yeah, I mean, I think Serrano can be a good fighter for that in that division.
Yep.
Um, what did you think of Kevin Souza?
Oh, I love Kevin Souza. I think he has the potential to creep into that like top 15 territory, edge it out. He's getting to the point where he's been around long enough that we should be starting to see him as a fully fledged fighter. I don't really consider him a prospect anymore, but he's also one of those guys who, like, at the very highest level, he's just going to be too predictable to
Yeah.
beat top competition.
Yeah, I mean, his right hand is just lethal. I don't
Yeah,
like it's such a natural right hand, and he's so confident in it, and the way that he throws it, like, I mean, the way that he knocked out Katsunori Kikuno was stunning. I mean, he friggin' face planted him. Like,
yeah.
that was a legit go to sleep, you're done kind of knockout. Like, which is always impressive. I don't know if I'm quite as high. I don't know if he can get to the top 15, but he's fun as hell. He's going to be a great action fighter, if nothing else,
Well,
especially because he's afraid to get hit.
yeah. My picture of the top 15 is that sort of like Darren Elkins, Clay Guida,
Oh yeah,
you know, uh, oh, what's his name? Who Conor McGregor just beat the pants off of? Dennis
Dennis.
Seaver. There's a few guys lurking up there that I would pick Adiva over, or pick Souza over rather
Hmm.
at this point, just because his style, like, he is a pretty good counter wrestler and he's a very good striker, and he's not going to get much further than that. But I mean, I kind of think of him a lot like Eddie Wineland without quite the same fast twitch power.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a good point. If anything, I actually think his process is better than Wineland's is. Like, he
Yeah,
throws more volume. But that's an interesting parallel. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Like, somebody for whom striking is really all they're going to do to you.
yeah,
Like,
and
well,
not
he's
just
never.
striking, but boxing. Just
Yeah, yeah.
nothing else.
And even super dominant with one hand in the boxing, like with
Yeah,
90% of the time, and with Souza, it's his right, which he throws probably 80% of the time.
yeah. It's so rare to see a range boxer in MMA who's an effective range boxer. Like, that's actually just not something we see that often.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, God, yeah, there really are not many of them.
No.
Like, God, now you got me trying to think of a few, and
Well,
I
there was
guess
a Diaz's, and Wineland has been good in his time, and um,
Junior Dos Santos.
Junior
I
Dos
mean,
Santos,
fight
Tony
stuff.
Ferguson. You know,
Yeah,
he's
Ferguson
got
will kick though.
what?
Uh,
Yeah, he'll
Ferguson
he'll
will kick
he'll
quite a
kick a
bit.
little, but he really likes his boxing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I mean is kind of like an outboxer,
Yeah.
which I think is what Souza really is, more
Oh
than
yeah.
like the Diaz's, are going to try and back you up to the fence and they're going to try and pressure you. And Souza is more of a puncher who likes to be kind of outside at the fringes of your range. He doesn't even really want to be in the pocket all that
Yeah.
much. So he'll throw from there. Like I don't know. You're right. That's a good point, Zane. It's a really rare kind of skill to see in a successful fighter.
It is, and it's something like I mean he's got it perfectly down to a science. Just like keeps his hands cocked at his hips, which I love because it puts a lot of emphasis on his head movement and on stuffing shots rather than having a high forearm guard.
Mm-hmm.
And then just keeps up a constant volume at range. Doesn't walk himself out of his preferred range, which is such a massive problem. You see so many outfighters that just walk themselves into the clinch constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I wonder, do you know if he has a boxing background, or is he an MMA fighter who just decided he really likes to throw hands, like Junior?
I really have no idea. I think I'm actually just really not sure. I would assume he probably has some sort of amateur boxing background in Brazil, but it may not be to any level that would be notable.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who have never tried to track down something like amateur boxing results from Brazil, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah,
Like, it's just like that shit is just never going to show up unless you have a deep knowledge of Portuguese. Um,
yeah.
so tough questions. What did you make of Gilbert Burns' performance?
I was really happy about it, honestly,
Hmm.
because I think we've gotten to this point where like for a lot of fans, we've forgotten about the value of being able to rally back for an incredible win.
Mhm.
It's like, there was a point when it's like thinking of like Fedor against Fujita. You know, it's like Fedor got shit canned in that fight by a really mediocre puncher. And he rallied back for this amazing win, and it's like part of his mystique. It was part of what made him incredible. And now we're at this point in MMA where it's just like, oh, he struggled. What a loser.
Mhm.
And to me, I see this and it's like, yeah, he struggled, but he still won. Like,
Yeah.
he still came back, turned around, and just absolutely slapped an impossible armbar on Oliveira out of nowhere to make sure he won that fight. You know?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think like if you talk to coaches, really good coaches, for the most part, and to kind of turn this into a broader point about prospect development, coaches don't want like really good coaches do not want their guys in squash matches. They don't want their guys coming up and just running through everybody that they fight. Or if they're going to be running through guys, they want them to be running through legit guys. Like like when you talk to like Lou Neglia, who runs Ring of Combat, like Lou Neglia will say, "Well, I want all those fights to be competitive between prospects. Their cards constructed entirely from prospects,
Yeah.
and he wants all those fights to be competitive. There's no fight to get somebody over, and I can't tell you how many coaches I've talked to who have said something like that. That like really you want your guys to be tested because when it comes to the top, if you're really on your way to the top, you need to know how to deal with that. You need to know what it's like to be in there with somebody who is really and truly capable of beating you, and you need to know what it's like to have to fight back from that. And so I'm with you. I'm with you on that. It was a little worrisome that all it took was an uppercut to stop Burns's takedowns. Like that he got so worried about ducking into an uppercut that he didn't change levels in the pocket for about a round and a half.
Yeah, I think there are two things I'd take from it really in like a technical aspect. One would be that we already know that Henry Hoof's striking takes time for guys
Yeah.
to learn. So I'm not necessarily that worried about Burns not dealing that well on his feet because it's like, well, he's going to keep developing unless something just breaks,
Mhm.
you know? he's been developing slowly. He met a guy who's further along, who is not afraid, who's powerful, and who has a good chin. And he's
Mhm.
never really faced that before. He's
Yeah,
never fought a striker that's further along than he was.
yeah. I
And
mean,
so I don't think that's a problem. But I do wonder with Blackzilians if maybe that, like, some of that wrestling game is not quite clicking in the right way. Like, I do wonder a bit about that, just because I know the counter wrestling is, but thinking about too, like Serrano and his takedown game, and just like how oftentimes misplaced it was, and how like he would seem to wrestle at the wrong times and in the wrong ways. I do wonder if there's a process missing there.
I think in Burns's case, I think he was surprised that Oliveira wasn't just going to go away right away, and I think
Yeah.
it got in his head for a while, because Burns has been so physically dominant over everybody, even Yagos, who is a fantastic athlete. Burns out athleted him. So I think he was surprised by how fast and how powerful Alex Oliveira was. I think that played a role in it. Um, I think it was just a whole lot of surprises for him. I think that he got confused by Oliveira's movement, because Oliveira is kind of a tricky fighter, right?
Hmm.
Like he moves in strange ways. He operates at weird ranges. His timing and his rhythm are very strange and hard to work off of. And I think for a fighter like Burns, who is classically trained in everything that he does, everything that
Yeah.
he does is by the book. It's by a book, like that he's almost a little too rote with the way that he works, and this was true of his. I think this is what I think you're getting at with the wrestling is like there were spots where Burns was programmed to shoot a takedown, right?
Hmm.
And it wasn't hard to figure out what those spots were if you were looking for them. He's kind of rote with his striking, like that he has particular
Yeah.
combinations that he throws really well. I mean, they're fast, they're powerful, his hands are quick, his kicks are hard, like his footwork is good, his weight transfer is good. But if you know that that's coming, you can deal with it. And I think that Oliveira kind of had him figured out after a little while.
Yeah, it's. I mean, and that's just one of those things with like that's development though. Like
Yeah, yeah,
a big stage of development is that you're learning all of these things, and maybe learning them all purely mechanically, and like you're gonna learn how to do this the right way, and you're gonna learn it, and you're gonna learn it, and you're gonna learn it, and soon enough, all of that becomes second nature. That then you can start to experiment and build and do more difficult things to break it down because you know it all so well. And Burns isn't there yet, but that's fine. I think
yeah.
that's just what this fight showed me, and that's why I say, like, for me, it wasn't. It was good. Like he faced a wall that he did not look like he had the tools to get by, and he still won.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with you. I like that was not necessarily the take that I was going to go with moving into this, but you've won me over to that. Um, and I think that with the Black Zillions as a team, I think even more so than another kind of factory-like team like ATT, the Black Zillions is filled with coaches who believe in the right way and the wrong way to do things, or that there is a right way and a wrong way to do things. I mean, Henry Hooft is very much like this, and Pedro Diaz, who works the boxing with a whole bunch of them, is like that quite a bit. That there are correct ways to go about doing things, and there are incorrect ways, and that does not necessarily lend itself to what you might call a kind of an organic approach for a fighter, especially a young fighter. And I think you're absolutely right, saying it's going to take you some time to figure out how to use all those pieces in kind of a fluid way, to learn how to adapt situationally these things that you have learned by heart. And I think you're absolutely right that for a lot of guys, that's a factor in development. Every once in a while, a guy comes along who just gets it, and gets it from the beginning. But those are the phenoms, that's
Yeah.
Chris Weidman and John Jones and Georges St. Pierre and, a few other guys that we could list where they just get how everything fits together, they get how it works, and you don't need to show them twice. But most fighters aren't like that. Even most very good fighters aren't like that.
Yeah, and especially Black Zillions, what we've seen with guys who go there is they tend to get stripped down and rebuilt. We've already seen this and talked about it with a few fighters, that they really seem to end up in this developmental stage that can give them heavy setbacks. I mean, it can be a thing where it's just like tearing it all down and saying, here you are, you now have nothing, and we're going to rebuild from there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're just seeing Burns in the midst, still in this process, and then, I still expect him to come out the other side of it a very good fighter.
Mm-hmm.
So, other than that, Andre Fili, he met the perfect storm. It's like crazy offense meets crazy. Well, it's like crazy flaws meet crazy flaws, and whose flaws come out on top.
Yeah.
And got afraid of Pepe. Like, I'm not more sold on Pepe after this fight, but it does look like he has made his crazy processless fighting style much more deadly lately. Like, he knows how to attack now, even if he's not setting up those attacks. And still,
Yeah, his Pepe has one of the more bizarre games that you'll ever see operating at a reasonably high level in MMA. And I remember writing this. I remember very distinctly writing this line in my preview when I did my prediction for this fight. I think I predicted Fili by knockout, but there was a line in my prediction that went something like, "It is not at all inconceivable that Fili will get over aggressive and manage to walk his way right into a submission." And that's exactly what happened. Like, he got careless in the clinch with Pepe, and Pepe just jumped on a flying triangle. And Pepe, for all of his many flaws as a fighter, ranging from his bad chin to his processless striking to his drastic over willingness to jump guard, like, all of those things are flaws. But he's still very, very good at the things that he's good at doing. Like, he has a lethal triangle, and if you're in his triangle for 2 minutes, you're probably going to end up tapping at some point. Like, so it's a combination of bad luck and over-aggressiveness, and, like, that's just kind of the story of Fili's career. Like, all credit to him. I still think he's a very good fighter. I think he's one of those dudes who's just going to come out and, like, at some point you're going to think, oh, yeah, okay, that's what everybody saw. Like, but...
Yeah, he's been around long enough that he should be getting it. Like, this loss shouldn't really have happened. But if it did, I mean, it just may mean that he's on an exceptionally slow development curve. Even though he's, still only 24, he's also been fighting since he was like 17.
I think he was 19 when he had his first fight, 18 or 19.
2009, so yeah, 18 maybe,
yeah.
Or late 2009. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure what to make of him. I certainly hope that Fili's successful because he's a really great guy. I think he's a fun fighter. I think in the worst case scenario, he's kind of he ends up as like a top 25-ish action fighter. Best case scenario, I still think he could be a top 10 kind of guy, just because he's so powerful and such a good athlete and can do so many different offensive things. But it's like, he is an offensive fighter. Like, that's what he is, And there's some dudes who are just like that like, they're never going to figure out defense because they just want to hurt you. And that's what Fili does. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I hope that he does develop, but not holding my breath. But I'm not going to write him off.
Yeah, it was a loss. Like I say, it's a loss. I think that anytime you're drawing that fight up on paper, Fili shouldn't have lost that fight. It's unfortunate. The only other fighter I think I wanted to talk briefly about, maybe, there were two, I suppose, sort of in the same boat. No, not in the same boat at all, actually. So weirdly, but whatever. I'm gonna lump them together just because I want to get through this, and they're not people I'm that big on. Tony Martin, Leonardo Mafra. Mafra seems to have solved most of his troubles. He still runs himself straight into punches, which is going to catch up with him. But he's got a fun, like, Muay Thai 101 basics game going on.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony Martin is still not the guy.
Yeah, Tony Martin, this seems so eminently obvious to me, is that he's a welterweight, not a lightweight. Yeah. Like, if your problem is you gas halfway through the second round in every fight, and you're a dude who's a thick 6'1" and you're cutting to 155, maybe those two things are connected. I'm just saying. Yeah. Like, it seems like an obvious thing that, like, I bet he walks around at 190 pounds, why would you keep cutting to 155? He's a young dude. Just go to 170, win 3 fights on the regionals, and then you're back in the UFC. I mean, he was a guy who was too raw when they brought him in the first place.
Yeah.
He was one of these guys that, like, he was a late replacement. He was super raw at the time. He gave a good accounting of himself for about a round, and then he got beat. He got beat by a much more advanced prospect in Rashid Magomedov. They gave him another fight. Who did he fight after that?
Benil.
Oh yeah. So he fights a prospect who's more developed than he is, who's more advanced than he is, and again he lasts about a round and a half before he gets totally gassed. Like you can't be a high level fighter if you're going to gas after a round. Like you just can't. Those two things are mutually exclusive, and it seems to me like they always talk about how big he is. It's like, well, be less big. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's like, if your problem is gassing, cutting weight helps to gas you. Like, cut less weight.
Yeah. That's definitely, I mean, he's going to have to rebuild something. I don't know if he'll be cut quite yet. He very likely will be, but he did win his last fight, so they might give him another one after this. But he's going to have to figure that out. And like I say, Mafra looked good, still has some problems, but fun fighter.
I like Mafra, man. He is fun. He's like, he's just one of those no fucks to give, puts his chin down and tries to blast you with combinations. And he's a pretty good defensive wrestler. He's a pretty good offensive wrestler. He's like, he can blast you from top position. He's not a great athlete, but he hits even though he hits really hard. But he's just fun. Like, he's going to be a great lightweight action fighter for a few years. Like,
yep.
I'm glad he's got it figured out.
All right, so let's move on to these seasons of TUF. The first one, let's talk about. Oh, I just lost Pat. Hopefully he'll be right back. We're going to talk first about TUF 21, American Top Team versus Blackzilians. And like we already said in the build up to this, the big thing that we're what?
Yes. Sorry, cut out there for a minute.
Yeah, no big deal. So we're talking about TUF 21, and the big thing we talked about is just how much better this season is than any of like the past 5 years of TUF. Just simply because they have decided to go with camps and the camp scouting system rather than the TV production scouting system. And there are a few guys that I am really looking out for on this season. Obviously, the most notable one for me is Kamaru Usman, who we scouted, and I'm actually kind of sad he's on TUF just because I hope he dominates on there, but if he doesn't, then I think a lot of people are just going to write him off. So, for his sake, I hope he did well. Anybody else that you're watching out for?
Yeah, a lot of guys. I think Steve Montgomery is a really interesting prospect, a guy who had 1 or 2 fights in Titan, and very tall. He's like 6'4", right?
Yep,
yeah,
6'4".
Yeah, I mean, and a very interesting fighter. I'm interested in that. I think Michael Graves is a guy I've heard a little bit about, but I don't think I've actually seen him fight. He seems kind of interesting.
He's hyper aggressive and hyper raw. He's one of those guys, like the regional guy who's come out of a smaller camp, he's come out of a pretty big camp in this case, but who's just like all aggression on the regional scene in every facet.
Yeah, that's probably not going to work out great for him against this field.
Yeah.
The guy I really have my eye on is kind of a sleeper here is Carrington Banks.
Mm-hmm.
Who was a wrestler at Wartburg, I think, and I believe he was a junior college national champion, if memory serves correctly. And just from watching him wrestle, and like you watch his fights, and there's nothing terribly special in there. He just looks like your standard, like overpowering but super raw former collegiate wrestler. There's nothing terribly special in there, but you watch him wrestle, and he is super fast. He is super strong. Really has a lot going for him tool-wise. In other words, he looks exactly like a lot of other dudes the Blackzilians have brought in. These former, like highly athletic former wrestlers that they're just going to mold from the beginnings of their careers. Like, in other words, he reminds me a lot of Usman.
Yeah. I'm definitely excited about Carrington Banks, and one of the guys that I'm actually really excited on. We just scouted him, and he actually ended up being the number four guy in our middleweight scouting report. Is Uros Jurisic
Oh
or
yeah,
Jurisic,
Jurisic.
and yeah, Jurisic, and he is an incredibly good athlete, no question, and an incredibly natural grappler. Like, and it's weird I have to say this because I mean, maybe Jacare would be a better example, but then you start saying Jacare and people are like, oh well, is he a five-time Brazilian world champion? I don't think he is. Um, but I always say I almost have to say like Rousey-esque in that
Mhm.
like just that natural predilection for pain in grappling.
Mhm.
This is like I'm just gonna grab a part of you and I'm gonna break it, and then we'll work from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've always thought of that as the Frank Mir approach.
Yeah,
Like, grab something and twist it real hard and see what happens. Like, position matters less than your willingness to just crank the shit out of a limb.
and
Um,
and the difference between him and like a Frank Mir, and maybe why I'm more apt to the Rousey comparison, is he's really like bendy. He's one of those guys who's not only is he powerfully built, but he's really flexible and just really able to just sneak his body around you from any position and grab one of your arms and just wrench it.
you know what he kind of reminded me of watching him on tape is like one of the great mini submission hunting Polish prospects who's running around out there. That's very much what he reminded me of. Like a very physically talented guy and a very very aggressive hunter of limbs. Like,
Yeah. Well,
I
he
mean,
was like right below or right above Oscar Pichota, who is another guy who's just very aggressive, submission grappler.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
I'm interested in him too. God, let's see, who else was there here? I'm looking at the list a little bit. There's some filler guys like Valdir Araujo have been around the block. I know people are excited that Luis Buscapé is on. People remember him back from the Pride Bushido shows back in the day. Andrews Nakahara, same deal. He fought in Pride. I think that a lot of people are going to look at this and they're going to point to guys like Steve Carl and Nathan Coy as being the favorites to win it. I mean, Carl was the World Series of Fighting welterweight champion. Coy has fought, just about everybody at some point. Nathan Coy has fought him. But like those, I think my favorite has to be Kamaru Usman. I think Jurisic has a good shot. I think Carrington Banks has a good shot at it. Like those are my favorites. Those three.
yeah, and I'm definitely hoping to see Graves and Montgomery move on and develop in the UFC. I like Montgomery's game a lot. He's one of those tall, rangy guys who he tends to like his range boxing isn't bad, but he really works best when he's pressing you up against the cage and just like grinding away and chipping away at you with knees and working that kind of game. And he's a lot of fun. He seems like a good guy. Seems like he's got a pretty fully developed game and the size to make himself an interesting fighter for the UFC.
Yeah, like a rich man, Seth Baczynski. Would you say that's his ceiling?
Yeah, I compare him a lot to Mike Pyle, quite frankly.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Tennessee waterfall and all.
Yeah, there is nothing better than Mike Pyle's mullet. Just absolutely nothing better.
Yeah,
Um,
Montgomery's got the same one, so you know.
Jesus God.
Yeah, and I think of Pyle as sort of a rich man Seth Bashinsky at that point too. So
That is a totally fair that is a totally fair comparison. I'm okay with that. Um, so moving on, we got Tough Brazil 4 coming out as
yep,
well. We got bantamweights and lightweights.
yep, we got middleweights and lightweights, and so obviously there's a much bigger cast. We don't know who's going to get in the house on this one, which I don't like because I think you can kind of pick out who a lot of the good, interesting talent is just by watching tape on them, and giving one of them a chance for some freak submission loss. Like, I remember I was watching a clip, prepping myself for World Series, doing a World Series of Fighting review or preview, and I watched Jake Hewen
Mm-hmm.
fighting Todd Monahan for
Yep.
a spot on Tough 19,
Yeah, I remember that.
and Hewen just beat the piss out of Monahan for like a round and a half, And then at the very end of it, Monahan slapped on like this miracle come from behind armbar. And then, now Yoon is in World Series of Fighting, and Monahan is nowhere near the UFC.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think this speaks to. I think because I would level the same critique. I'm with you. I think that to a greater extent than they have to this point, the UFC needs to use its properties to kind of pick some favorites and try and figure out who are the people that are going to be worth it for us to push as top fighters. And like having to fight your way into the house to me says like, well, we couldn't like we just got a whole bunch of guys that we like, and then we're going to let the chips fall where they may. I think I am a big advocate of trying to play in a little bit more. And what happens during your tournament happens during your tournament, but just take fewer guys and really focus on the ones that you think either for reasons of personality or just pure skill are going to be the guys that you want to push. I think that, and like for a long time, they've put so much emphasis on personality and making the show entertaining. It's like, okay, I get that, but at the same time, what's the point of having personality guys if they can't friggin' fight?
Well, and nobody ended up ever being like the end result was that people were less and less entertained by the personalities of the fighters on the show.
Yeah, like look at TUF 19 as a perfect example of that, and that was a season that did have some talent on it. There were some guys on there, but like. They were all so raw and so conservative because they wanted to win that like the show was literally unwatchable. I don't think there was a single finish in any of the fights on the entire season.
No. And the guys who came off the UFC, I mean, they've immediately, Corey Anderson's on the super slow development track, but Eddie Gordon's already lost. Like he already is kind of like, well, your tough winner just got head kick KO'd in his second fight in the UFC.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that in that case, that was actually a tough matchup for him. Like I think that Saman was kind of a sneaky tough fight for Gordon, and I think they should have given him more of a softball, like if they wanted to build him. But yeah, no, I mean, Gordon, I think, is still going to be fine, but like, it was one of those fights where it's like, well, okay, so this is kind of a substantial step up, and Gordon got fucked up. He got like, there's no real other way to put that.
No, and it shows this idea of just how raw some of these guys are grabbing iron. I mean, now you already have like, Gordon beat Diego Lima in the finals, and Diego Lima is like a hair's breadth away from being totally gone from the UFC.
This is true, yeah.
So it does speak to this idea of like maybe not valuing personality so much and trying to get some more talented fighters would be nice.
Well, yeah,
anyway,
I mean, look at Cesar Ferreira, who has been hyped for quite a while, and it turns out he's just not that good. Like, but he's got the look they were looking for. So here we are.
So, first off, let's take a look at the bantamweights. And I have to admit, I think I don't actually. There's a few good fighters on both sides. I was gonna say I'm more impressed by one set than the other, but I don't know. There are actually a few bantamweights I'm really interested in. I think the top guy that I think could be a big upset chance is Mateus Matos.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy that could be the one that comes out of nowhere and wins the show over guys like Leandro Higo and Delano Lopez.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if Matos makes it through the opening round, I think he's a dude who could surprise. I like Matos a lot. I think he's really good. It's going to be guys like Higo and Lopez, the two that you mentioned, and I think. To a lesser extent, like Giovanni Soldado, Giovanni da Silva Santos, guys who have a lot of name recognition on the regional scene, guys who have 5, 6, 7 years of experience. Those guys are going to be the ones that I think the hardcore fans are going to look on as the favorites to win it. But I would actually be surprised if one of them did. I really think you're onto something with looking at a guy like Matos as a better candidate. I like Matos a lot. I've liked his game for a long time. I think like Delano Lopez has just gotten absolutely screwed at every point. Like he should have been on the first season of TUF Brazil. But in the elimination round, he got matched up with Honey Jason, who was the favorite to win the whole thing from the very beginning. You know, like, so he gets in there with Honey Jason, who clean knocks him out because he outweighs him by 20 pounds, and and so then Lopez goes and he loses one fight on the regionals to, God, who did he lose to? This is gonna kill me.
Shit. Here,
he lost to Adriano Moraes, who is he immediately went and lost to Adriano Moraes, who is now the ONE FC flyweight champion. Somehow, I don't know how he makes 125. But so he loses to Moraes, and now it's taken him basically to the end of his, basically to the beginning of the end of his prime to get back to a point where he can make it to the highest level. So Lopez is like, A, an argument against the existence of TUF in the first place. B, he's an argument against the elimination round. I mean, feel bad for him, but this is kind of Lopez's last chance for a guy who was at one point one of the most highly touted prospects in the world, regardless of weight class.
Yeah, it's true, and it sucks. It's why I don't like to see serious prospects go through TUF, because I just think that there's such a good chance that the show makes, that they get screwed over in the tournament somehow. Maybe they get injured, maybe they get knocked out, maybe they get submitted and make a mistake, and then suddenly, in a bout that won't even be on their record, they've suffered a huge career setback.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really is a thing. But with that said, what are your thoughts on Leandro Ego, guy who's been around for a while, highly touted prospect?
I think he's really, he's an obvious athlete, and I think he'll be the obvious favorite going in. He's the guy that I would probably pick on the outset to win it. But my one thing I would worry about with him is that he's not very aggressive.
Yeah.
And he could end up not winning fights because of it. Especially over somebody, and Matos has kind of the same problem. They're both really obviously good athletes, but they're also the kind of guys who are going to wait and look for that perfect shot, look for that perfect opportunity, and if it doesn't come, they can get hit up. They can get hit a bit and worked over a little bit in the meantime.
Yeah, both Ego to me looks like a dude who is very good. Everything he does, he has potentially plus skills in every single facet of the game. He's got a beautiful flying knee. He's a good boxer. He's a hard kicker. He's actually got a great wrestling arsenal, considering he has no wrestling background. I mean, he's really good at high amplitude slams and double legs, and using your kind of crushed reaction when he slams you to the mat to immediately pass. He's a really skilled dude. But the problem is, lack of aggressiveness, and what that translates into is a lack of offensive activity. He'll go through stretches where he'll only throw 4 or 5 strikes a minute. And when you're fighting guys at the very top, I don't think this is going to be a huge problem on TUF, because guys really, for a variety of reasons having to do with conditioning and cutting weight in a short time, and also not having time to prepare for a specific opponent, the offensive output on TUF tends to be lower.
Yeah.
So I don't think it'll necessarily come back to haunt him there. I assume that Ego will end up in the UFC, and if he does, then it could. Then it absolutely could come back to haunt him. I don't think unless he makes drastic changes, I don't know that he's the kind of guy who's going to challenge for a spot in the top 5 or anything.
Well, and he's also been fighting long enough at this point that even though he's young, we may be seeing a guy who's on borrowed time, where it's you achieve right now, because you're not going to be making those changes in a couple of years. It's just not going to happen. The only other guy I want to pick out is a really weird, this is a guy that I don't know I hope he makes it to the UFC, because I want to watch him there, and I think he has a really fun game. I don't think he has quite the physical tools to ever be a top fighter, but he should be a fun fighter to watch, is Matheus Nicolau. And he is a really interesting, I think he has an amateur boxing background, and he's basically just he's coming in looking to box from the outside, to be a range boxer, likes to throw a lot of combinations, body, head, does a lot of good things with his hands. His only loss is to Pedro Nobre, who is lambasted for supposedly faking an injury against Yuri
Uriel.
Alcantara, but is actually a surprisingly decent fighter outside of that. Like, is a pretty talented regional vet.
Yeah, the only
And
other guy who's beaten Pedro Nobre, or the only guy who's beaten Nobre aside from Alcantara, and Alcantara did beat him, is Shimon Moraes, who's like an uber prospect in World Series of Fighting now. He's probably going to fight Marlon Moraes next. Like
yeah,
that's the only dude who's beaten Nobre. So like that's not even a bad loss.
no, and there was one of those things where Nicolau just got hit with a hard combo coming in, like walked straight into it, got put on roller skates, got beat up. So maybe not having the best chin and having a really high volume range boxing game might not work out perfectly, but I would be really interested to see him because he's one of the better, I think, strikers on this show.
Mhm.
So looking at lightweight, obviously a guy I'm looking at is Nicholas Mata. I would really like to see him succeed. I think he's got a great game in development for the UFC. But the other fighter I have highlighted, I have several, but the other big fighter I have highlighted is Raush Manfio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was hoping that you'd mention him. I caught his fight with Fernando dos Santos, who is a Nova União prospect, and a very good one, very good fighter. A lot like Hakron Diaz, if you guys have watched him at all. Yeah, Manfio is a real talented dude. He's a great athlete. He's a little spark plug of a dude. Really physically strong. I mean, is going to be a featherweight or maybe even a bantamweight in the UFC. But a super physically talented dude. He's got a lot going for him. He's a Team Nogueira guy. He's young. He doesn't have a ton of experience. Like he's definitely a guy to watch. I'm glad you mentioned him.
Yeah, there are two other really rough diamonds that I'm hoping will turn out, and that's Glycol Franca and Gabriel Macario.
Mhm.
They are both guys that have all the physical tools, but don't have. Well, Macario is definitely a boxer turned MMA fighter, and is really purely like a boxer, like with the same holes and problems that a boxer can have. But it's like, well, how much is he going to develop that? How much is he going to fix that? He's got good hands. He's got some power. He's got some skill. Um, but I don't know how much that's all going to come together. And then Franca is just a like really physically imposing fighter, but super rough everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Macario. I watched one of his fights as it was going. I can't remember. I think it was his last fight actually. It was this August show. And dude is real talented. Dude's legit talented. But he's one of those dudes who's either going to come in, get taken down, and immediately submitted in the fight to get into the house, or he could win the show. Like
Yeah.
he's one of those dudes where you don't like all of those things are in play. And if anything, I hope that he's a guy who comes in, makes it into the house, and then gets the opportunity to move to a better camp because he comes from a small camp, if memory serves correctly. He's one of those dudes that you hope like TUF turns into an experience that kind of launches them onto the rest of their career path. Like when he's exposed to working with high-level training partners and high-level coaches. But yeah, I mean, I feel like kind of in a broader sense, like this show is the UFC's attempt to really hunt for and find their next Brazilian star because they need one. They need one real bad. And they scooped up all of the dudes who could potentially be that star between 125 and 155 pounds in Brazil. Every dude that you were looking at is on this list.
Yeah. So the question then is, what's Nazareno Malagari doing on there? And is he going to totally wreck some prospects' chances, or that like because he almost seems like one of those fighters that I know will be in the finale and will lose the finale. Like you could just like bookmark him. He's like he will make it to the end of the Ultimate Fighter, and then he will not win. He will not win the whole thing.
Yeah, I distinctly remember watching him lose to Rad Martinez, and I remember saying to myself, like, oh, that's his ceiling. Like, but, the thing is, so he's mostly a submission guy, with not great takedowns and some ability to strike. Like, he's a pretty decent striker, but not a great one, and not a great athlete either. So part of what makes me think that he may not get through this is that a lot of the dudes he's going to be fighting will physically outclass him. Like, this is a really, really athletic group of guys, and the only thing, like, I think it's funny that you say that like, you've got him pegged just he's going to make it to the finale and lose the finale, because I think that's totally plausible. But I think that I do think that he's going to lose at some point. I don't think he's going to win the show, for the same reason that, like, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Steve Carl or Nathan Coy ended up in the final of TUF, of the ATT versus Blackzilians TUF. That, like, these dudes know a lot of things that the other guys just don't know how to do, because they've got the experience. But at the same time, they're not getting any younger. They don't necessarily have the physical tools that their compatriots do. And when you give a really physically talented dude 3 months to prepare for you, and presumably a top-notch camp to do it at, a lot of the time they're going to win that fight. You know?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that, like, I mean, because Macario just seems like he has one of those styles that could be really good on TUF, where it's just, like, really consistent, really bullish, and really high pressure. The kind of thing that when you don't have time to prepare for somebody and you don't have, like, a lot of time to build your game, he can just kind of come in and pull that out and make it work. Yeah. So I do think, like, there's a good chance that he could make somebody like Nicholas Mata or Gabriel Macario or somebody like that look bad, and just, you know, take some fights that I'd rather he didn't, but I don't think he'll win the whole thing.
Yeah, I am really looking forward to seeing Nicholas Mota. He was a guy that you had ranked, what, like third or fourth on your scouting report at 145?
I think fifth.
Fifth? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was not super high on him on the first watch, but after looking at his stuff again, I see what you guys saw there. Like, it makes more sense to me now. He still hasn't beaten anybody who's any good whatsoever.
No, he hasn't.
But then again, you know, like, neither had TJ Dillashaw before he went on The Ultimate Fighter, I don't think.
Yeah, so, and it's just one of those things where he's got the aggression and the application. Mm-hmm. Like, he has the right process, and he is aggressive all the time. Like, he's the kind of fighter who, you know, he's got that Muay Thai game working, and he's on his opponents, throwing constantly, and he's not overextending himself and getting, like, stupid, crazy, wild. He's just, you know, the process is right.
He's crisp. So I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. I sincerely hope that he makes it through. He is just drastically outsized by a lot of these dudes, though, because he is generously listed at 5'6", and I don't think he's 5'6".
Yeah, he was a small featherweight for us scouting. So I hope he gets something out of this, because that is my word. Like I say, that's the kind of thing, is, you know, you don't know who's going to be that guy that just doesn't make the show, and then it totally sets their career back in a really stupid way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's give a quick shout out to some regional MMA just briefly before we wrap this whole thing up. Bellator is actually going on right this minute. I don't know where that card is. Let me see.
Thackerville, Oklahoma, I believe.
Not where it is physically. I don't give a shit about where it is physically.
You mean you're trying to find the tab?
No, you just, like, where we are in the fight card. So Neil Ewing won his fight at I guess he's at 185 now. He's one of the few American light heavyweight prospects that I was really interested in, and have not seen any tape on him. He's one of those dark fighter, you know, blackout fighters where their manager is just swallowing up all their tape and making sure none of it gets out. So this is sort of his first showing on a major show. And Emanuel Sanchez is a Rufus Sport prospect that I'm actually really kind of looking forward to seeing, as well as Guilherme Viana, who's a light heavyweight Brazilian fighter, unfortunately fighting Francis Carmont, but he just missed our top 10 in our scouting report there.
Mm-hmm. Viana could be solid. I remember seeing Sanchez's last fight. He's a good looking little guy there. But this is not Bellator's strongest offering. I put it that way.
No, I don't really care about the rest of the card. I'm just picking out a few names, you know.
Yeah. And then we got World Series of Fighting tomorrow.
Yep. And that obviously is headlined by Justin Gaethje. Let me just find him on Wikipedia here.
You were never gonna let me. You were never gonna stop doing that. Justin Gaethje, despite being richly deserving of one, does not have a Wikipedia page, which is bullshit. So take that as you will.
Yeah. Sorry.
So, but yeah, no, I mean, Gaethje is a dude that I scouted last year. I was pretty high on him, still pretty high on him. You know, he hits really hard. He's a really good athlete. He's got great cardio. He works at a very quick pace, and he is pathologically aggressive. He's got a surprisingly good pressure game. I kind of wonder if there's going to come a point where he'll just stop improving, and he relies entirely too much on his chin instead of anything resembling kind of effective defense. I kind of wonder if there's going to be a time where he either slows down or that completely catches up to him. But for now, he's awesome. I enjoy watching.
And as we mentioned earlier, Jake Yoon is on this card. He's actually a pretty good light heavyweight prospect. Really solid technical kickboxer. Pretty solid overall game. You know, his only losses tend to be by submission to other, Richard Odoms, who's like a huge heavyweight, not a very good fighter, almost made the UFC, but, big heavyweight. And then more recently to Damon Lake. He's lost to some scrappy, big grapplers, basically.
Yeah, he lost to Mark Ellis early in his career. I remember watching that fight, and Yoon was winning about the first 6 minutes of it before Ellis finally got him down and managed to work to his back, if memory serves.
And he's fighting a guy that I would compare to the light heavyweight Phil Baroni in Teddy Holder. So that's going to be very likely a very short and violent fight for one of those two.
Sounds about right, yeah.
And that it's an actual rare fight against two decent light heavyweight prospects on the rise. We so rarely see those that it's worth watching out for just because of that.
This is true. I have to laugh here real quick. The first fight on Teddy Holder's career took place at an event called Bang Fighting Championships. Never change regional MMA. Never
change. Only strongman submissions and big and really fast knockouts.
So that's perfect. That should be quality violence for your Saturday Night World Series of Fighting card.
And then Timur Valiev is fighting, and he's a hot prospect out of Jackson Winklejohn. So he's a guy that's really worth watching out for. Typical Dagestan fighting game, lots of high output kicking style, high output wrestling, really solid top game. Fun fighter. I'm looking forward to that. So there's a few guys on these cards worth watching out for, and even on a weekend without any UFC to go through.
Yep, you'll still find plenty of face punching.
Absolutely. On that note, I think we are done here. I can't think of anything else. We were going to get to, just a shout out, we had a reader send in or listener, I don't know, hopefully not watcher. I can't imagine sitting and actually watching us do this. But we had somebody who is associated with this show in some way send an email asking us to go over what we think about guys coming out of other combat sports as being better prepared prospects than guys who are just going into MMA raw. And we would like to touch on that, but we'd like to have Tom here. If his body's ever exhumed, we will try to reanimate him and bring him back on the show for that topic specifically. So that's why we didn't get to it here. Apologies. On that note, if you like the show, you can find Patrick Wyman at Patrick Wyman on Twitter. You can find me, or Patrick_Wyman on Twitter. What?
No, you got it.
Oh, at Patrick_Wyman on Twitter. Find me at TheZaneSimon. Find Pat over at SureDog. Find me over at Bloody Elbow. Give this video a like, thumbs up thing if you enjoyed it. That helps us get paid. And subscribe to MMANation.com for more shit like this. Thanks, everybody.